Hey guys, this is two things. First thing is I'm going to go through your assignments for the week. Second thing is LBJ lecture, which you should be listening to. It should be Tuesday when you're listening to it. I'm going to send this down every week so you have an outline of everything that you're going to be expected to do. These are things you got yesterday. You can see what you're going to have today to do. And then the rest of the week, you're going to have more assignments maybe than people we normally have in class because I've got to try to supplement you with what you're missing. So, not being in class, you miss stuff that otherwise you would have gotten if you were here. And we miss you all very much. It's not the same without you. All right, so Lyndon B. Johnson becomes president after Kennedy is assassinated. Remember, people think that Johnson's probably involved in some way with the assassination because he's from Texas and all of this happens in Texas. So you should have come to your own conclusions about that. I don't know. I would say it looks pretty sketchy, but either way, he becomes president once Kennedy is assassinated. And Johnson's focus for this part of the lecture, or this part of the class, is going to be more on his war on poverty. He creates a series of policies that we collectively refer to as the Great Society. This is a lot like FDR's New Deal and the Second New Deal. LBJ has the Great Society. And the Great Society is going to have 5 pieces of legislation, and these are major pieces of legislation that impact how he's going to fight poverty. And this picture is pretty interesting. People always ask me about it. Why is he so close to that guy's face? That's just what Johnson would do. He would use like intimidation factor, get up all in somebody's grill, and you're like, he's not even upset with this guy. That's just the way he talked to people, make him feel really, really uncomfortable, which stanky breath is what I think of. He doesn't look like he would have good breath at all. All right, so the first piece of legislation that is part of his Great Society is the Economic Opportunity Act of 1964. This is going to provide $1 billion, which is a ton of money now and then, to fight the war on poverty. Excuse me. It's going to establish the Economic Opportunity Office. And the Economic Opportunity Office coordinates Head Start, which you guys may have gone to Head Start, or you may know somebody who went to Head Start, provides early childhood education, because that's how you guys really, in the end, that impacts your education the most, is how you start out. So that's for poorer families, not necessarily poorer families, really anybody now. They also create the Job Corps for teenagers who need training to go to specific types of jobs. Usually these kids are kind of bad. Even CLC is not an option for them. And then VISTA, which is Volunteers in Service to America. It's a lot like the Peace Corps, but instead of sending people to places around the world like JFK did with the Peace Corps, you're going to send people around America to work in the poor areas of America. So VISTA is a pretty good program to be in. Maybe if the Peace Corps is a little bit too much for you, VISTA might be something that you're interested in. The second piece of legislation that's part of his Great Society is the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And we've already talked about this briefly when we were talking about the Civil Rights Movement. It's going to ban literacy tests and provide for voter registration in the South. It's also going to ban that 24 questionnaire that we talked about. Remember, this all happens after the march from Selma to Montgomery, where they're beaten by the state troopers. They go back the next day and they pray. It's all caught on television, and he has to take a stand somehow, because if you don't, just like JFK had to take a stance on the Civil Rights Movement, he chose to support it. It helped him. Lyndon B. Johnson is no fool, and he recognizes that. And we already talked about it. It was urged after the march to Selma. This is a picture of him signing the bill. Anytime the president signs a bill, it's a big ceremony, just like this picture, and he'll give the pens to all of these people who are influential in any bill actually getting signed and getting passed. The third piece of legislation that goes along with this is the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. This is going to be really important to providing quality education to those in rural areas and also poverty-stricken areas. This is the first time there's federal funding going towards education. And now we get a lot of federal funding, but this is in the 1960s, and prior to that, no federal funding at all. You're going to get $1 billion to schools in poor communities to improve a few things. One of those things is libraries, right? To update books, to even build libraries. Some schools didn't have libraries, and of course those are good resources for students. They would create learning centers, so places where students can go outside of school time to learn, or during the summer to continue to learn, because you do need to keep up even then. They also created language clubs. Those were mostly around the borders, especially in the Southwest. Also language clubs for immigrants that were coming in, so that not being an English-speaking student doesn't leave you so far behind. And then there was also money to other school services that you could determine how you could best help your schools that are in need. And a lot of the school districts that got this were actually in Kentucky, especially in eastern Kentucky. That's one of the places that LBJ traveled to highlight exactly how poor people in America were. And eastern Kentucky is not far at all from us. To get to the edge, it's going to take you about 45 minutes from here. So this impacted us in Kentucky quite a bit. The Elementary and Secondary Act is also going to increase funding to Native American schools, inner city schools, and what they refer to as Mexican schools, or schools where the majority of students are of Mexican descent. So again, those are all schools that still receive federal funding. All of this stuff still exists. They've changed it a little bit, put it into different categories, but that's why we have federal funding that go to your schools. So the Medical Care Act is a really important one. You all probably have grandparents. I would assume you do, or you wouldn't be here. And your grandparents, just like my grandparents, probably have access to Social Security, which was passed by FDR, and that provides retirement for elderly people. Now, one problem is when you retire from your job, that also means that you would lose your health insurance. So LBJ wants to fix that flaw in the program. And so he creates Medicare, which is basic hospital care insurance for elderly, which you have to be over 65, which now it's up to 67, who draw Social Security. So if you draw Social Security, you're over the age of 65, you would be eligible for basic hospital care insurance. My grandfather has used this. My grandmother has used it. They're both over 65. They both draw Social Security. I won't be eligible for Medicare ever, because I'm not going to draw Social Security because I don't put into the big pot. And we've talked about that before. You got to put into the big pot to pull out those benefits. So the Social Security money that comes out of your parents' checks will come out of your check, is actually going into this huge pot that is Medicare and being used for older people today. So there's no guarantee it'll be there later on. The other thing that he really wanted to be able to provide is basic medical services to the poor. So those people who could not afford health insurance even then, kids especially, and also those people that are disabled, because if you're disabled, you can't work. If you can't work, then you're not going to get health insurance, who do not draw Social Security. So you don't have to wait until 65 to get these benefits. Little kids, like, you may know someone who is on Medicaid. It's not a bad thing. It's just sometimes what you have to do. So this is basically providing health insurance for almost everyone if you fall into these categories, right? So they talk about President Obama is like giving health insurance to the poor and they don't even work. Well, not really. That happened under LBJ, but I guess nobody paid attention in their U.S. history class, or they would know that. The last part is the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965. It ended discrimination that only allowed European immigrants to come into the United States. So from like 1914 to 1965, we're only letting people from Europe come into the United States, and now we're going to open that up to everybody. The good thing about immigrants coming into the country is they bring the big thing is they're workers, and we need workers. Our country is growing at this point. They're also bringing in new ideas, new talents, new skills, and typically immigrants are just willing to do jobs that other Americans are not willing to do. So that is an important part of LBJ's Great Society program. You are going to be using these notes to complete a brochure assignment, and I will go over that with you right now. Let's see. If I can find it, I'll go over it with you. I don't think that's it. Ooh. I just had it. I just pulled it up and looked at it. Great Society brochure. There it is. All right. The purpose of LBJ's Great Society was to create a country where all Americans could enjoy quality life. To achieve this, Johnson had to pass several pieces of legislation that we just went over. And like most presidential policies of today, average Americans were confused about the goals of the program that Johnson had created. So your job is, you guys don't have to use Microsoft Publisher. You can just take a piece of computer paper and make your brochure and detail the 5 major programs created by President Johnson. So you have to have a cover page. You want it to make it appealing so people actually pick your brochure up and look at it. You need to include all 5 major programs we just went over, and all the relevant details about those programs and who those programs will affect, because like they don't all affect, like Medicare and Medicaid may not necessarily affect the same people that are going to be affected by the Immigration Act. You have to have at least 3 images, so you can print those off, you can draw them, and try to make them as bold and beautiful as possible. I'm not sure if you guys have colored pencils or crayons down there, but just do your best on that. So that's your assignment for today. So you should be working on that. The next video is going to detail the LBJ web quest. So make sure you watch that one next. See you later.